The camera saw me get up. The first time I watched the footage, I thought the app had mistaken somebody else for me. That explanation lasted until the person in the recording turned toward the bedroom and climbed back into my bed. I bought the camera because packages had been disappearing from the lobby of my apartment building. Nothing expensive had been taken from me, but the building manager sent out an email suggesting that residents keep better records of deliveries. The camera was small and ordinary, a black plastic lens on a white base. It connected to my phone and saved short clips whenever it detected movement. I placed it on a bookshelf in my living room. From there, it could see the front door, the couch, and most of the narrow hallway leading to my bedroom. The bedroom itself was out of view. At night, the camera switched to infrared mode. The footage became gray-green and grainy. Eyes reflected white. Dark furniture lost its edges. It was not a pleasant image, but I got used to it. For the first few weeks, the camera recorded nothing interesting. It captured me leaving for work. It captured me coming home with grocery bags. Once, it recorded a delivery driver placing a box outside my door after I forgot to change the motion zone. Most of the nighttime timeline was empty. Then, one morning, I noticed a motion alert from 3:00 a.m. The clip was 46 seconds long. I opened it while I was still in bed. For the first 3 seconds, the living room was empty. The camera's infrared lights made the couch look pale and flat. A small digital clock on the shelf showed 3,000. Then I walked out of the bedroom. I was barefoot. I wore the gray t-shirt and dark sweatpants I'd gone to bed in. My hair was flattened on one side. My shoulders hung forward as if I were barely awake. I stopped in the middle of the living room. Then I turned and faced the camera. I did not move for 28 seconds. The camera was 6 feet away from where I stood. My face was clear enough to recognize, though the night vision made my skin look waxy and my eyes almost black. I stared directly into the lens. There was nothing dramatic about it. I did not grin. I did not whisper. I did not reach for the camera. I simply stood there. Then I turned, walked back down the hallway, and disappeared into the bedroom. The clip ended. I watched it again. The second time, I paid attention to the sound. The camera's microphone had picked up the hum of the refrigerator and the faint hiss of air moving through the vent. My footsteps were soft against the rug. There were 6 of them on the way out and 6 on the way back. That was all. I checked the apartment. The front door was locked. The chain was still in place. Nothing had been moved. The gray shirt was on my body. The sweatpants were twisted around one ankle in the same way they were in the recording. Sleepwalking was the obvious answer. I had never sleepwalked before, as far as I knew. But people often said that about sleepwalking. The whole point was that you did not remember it. I searched online. I read about stress, irregular sleep, caffeine, and exhaustion. All of those seemed possible. Work had been busy. I had been sleeping badly. I often woke with a dry mouth and the dull pressure of a headache behind my eyes. I decided it was strange, but not frightening. Then it happened again the next night. The motion alert appeared at exactly 3:00 a.m. This time the clip lasted 1 minute and 12 seconds. I came out of the bedroom wearing different clothes. I walked to the same place in the living room. My feet stopped on the same section of rug. I looked into the camera. After about 30 seconds, I tilted my head slightly to the left. It was a small movement. Barely anything. What bothered me was that I never tilted my head that way. That sounds ridiculous. Everyone moves their head. There is no personal way to tilt it. But when you see yourself from an unfamiliar angle, you notice things. I tend to lean to the right when I am trying to hear something. I have done it for years. The movement in the video went the other way. It looked deliberate, like someone copying a gesture after being told what it was supposed to mean. The person in the video held the pose for 10 seconds. Then he straightened his head and returned to bed. I watched the clip 4 times. On the last viewing, I turned the volume all the way up. Just before I walked back into the hallway, there was a faint sound. It could have been fabric moving. It could have been the vent. It sounded like a slow breath taken very close to the microphone. I checked the camera settings. The time zone was correct. The device clock matched my phone. There were no shared users on the account. The login history showed only my phone. The footage had been uploaded at 3002 AM while I was asleep. I changed my password anyway. That day, I mentioned the recordings to a coworker named Mara. I tried to make it sound funny. I guess I've started checking on myself at night, I said. She asked what I meant. I showed her the first clip. Mara watched it without saying anything. When it ended, she looked at me, then played it again. You don't remember that? No. Have you ever walked in your sleep? Not that I know of. She handed the phone back. You should talk to somebody about it. Her tone was careful. It was the tone people use when they want to be helpful without sounding alarmed. I said I would. That evening, I set a glass of water on the floor inside my bedroom doorway. It was not meant as a trap. I only wanted to know whether I was walking through the doorway. The hall was narrow. There was no way around the glass without stepping carefully over it. I placed a folded receipt under the rim, with one corner pointing toward the bed. If the glass moved, I would know. The next morning, the glass was untouched. The receipt was still beneath it. The corner still pointed toward the bed. But there was another motion clip at 3000 AM. In the recording, I stepped into the hall without hesitation. The glass was not visible from the camera's angle, but I should have knocked it over. At the very least, I should have moved it. I walked to the usual spot. I faced the camera. This time, I lifted one hand. I held it in front of my chest, with the palm facing inward. My fingers opened and closed slowly. Once. Twice. 3 times. It looked as if I were testing the movement, or counting something that was too small to see. Then I lowered my hand. Before returning to the bedroom, I turned toward the couch. I reached down and moved one of the cushions from the left side to the right. When I got out of bed, the cushion was still on the left. I stood in the living room comparing the room to the frozen image on my phone. The difference was clear. In the recording, the cushion was on the right. In my apartment, it had never moved. I checked the timestamp again. I checked the date. I looked at the water glass in the doorway. Nothing made sense. I told myself the clip might have been from another night. Perhaps the app had placed the wrong timestamp on an older recording. I searched the entire history. There was no matching clip. I downloaded the video to my phone. Its information showed the same date and time. There were no cuts that I could see. The next step was customer support. I expected a form response, but someone replied within a few hours. They asked me to restart the camera, update the app, and confirm that automatic time settings were enabled. I did all of that. They also asked whether the camera might be recording through glass or another reflective surface. I told them it was not. It faced directly into the room. They suggested that low light compression could create visual artifacts. I sent them the clip. The reply came the next day. We do not see evidence of a software error in the attached recording. That sentence stayed with me. They did not say the video was accurate. They did not say it showed what had actually happened. They only said they could not see an error. I removed the camera from the bookshelf and examined it under the kitchen light. There were no scratches around the memory card slot, no loose wires, no sign that anyone had opened it. The black center of the lens reflected a tiny, curved version of my face. I turned it away before I could study the reflection. I reset the device to factory settings. Then I put it back on the shelf. For 2 nights there were no recordings at 3. I slept better. On the 3rd morning, I woke before my alarm and checked the app. A new clip was waiting. The person in the footage came out of my bedroom at 3:30 a.m. He did not stop in the usual place. He walked directly to the bookshelf. His face filled the frame. The infrared light flattened every familiar detail. My eyebrows were pale. The pores around my nose were sharp. My eyes reflected 2 small white points. He leaned close enough for his breath to fog the lens. For 11 seconds, the screen was covered by a thin gray cloud. Then he stepped back. He looked down at the base of the camera. His eyes moved from side to side as if he were reading something. There was nothing written there. He nodded once. Then he reached behind the camera. The recording ended. I checked the device. It was still plugged in. The power cord ran behind the shelf exactly as before. There was a faint oval mark on the lens. It looked like a patch left by condensation, though the glass was dry when I touched it. I cleaned the lens with the corner of my shirt. That night, I moved the camera. I placed it on a cabinet near the front door. The new angle showed the living room from the opposite side. It also showed more of the hallway. I did not update the device name in the app. It still said living room. At 3:00 a.m., it recorded me again. I walked out of the bedroom and stopped in the exact center of the new frame. I did not look toward the old position on the bookshelf. I looked directly at the camera. There was no searching movement, no confusion. Whoever stood there knew where the lens was. He raised his hand and repeated the slow opening and closing motion. This time he did it 4 times. Then he went to the small table beside the couch. There was a bowl on that table where I kept my keys, loose change, and other pocket clutter. The person in the recording removed everything from the bowl, 1 item at a time. My keys, 2 coins, a folded grocery receipt, a black pen. He lined them up along the edge of the table. He placed the keys first, then the coins, then the receipt, then the pen. He adjusted each object until the spacing was even. When he was finished, he stood behind the arrangement and looked into the camera. Then he returned to bed. In the morning, every item was still inside the bowl. I did not touch them for several minutes. The apartment felt different after that. It was not that I believed another person was living there. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a shallow utility closet containing a vacuum and a water heater. I checked those places anyway. The closet smelled like worm dust and detergent. The bathroom fan ticked as it slowed. The space beneath the bed held 2 storage boxes and an old pair of shoes. Nothing was there. Still, the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt recorded. Every ordinary action took on a second meaning. When I set down a mug, I wondered where the person in the video would put it. When I closed a cabinet, I wondered whether it would be open in the next recording. When I walked past the camera, I was aware of my posture. I thought about the way my arms moved. I noticed which foot touched the rug first. I began watching myself while I was still myself. That was worse than the clips. Mara asked whether the sleepwalking had stopped. I told her it had not. I showed her the recording with the keys. She watched the entire thing. When it ended, she asked, "Where were the keys in the morning?" "In the bowl." "Are you sure?" "Yes." She gave me a tired look. "I don't mean to be rude, but you're already saying you don't remember getting up." I left the phone recording the table before I went to sleep. This was not true. I do not know why I said it. Maybe I wanted one part of the story to sound certain. Mara paused. "You should stay somewhere else for a night." I said I would think about it. Instead, I bought a second camera. It was a different model from a different manufacturer. It used another app and stored clips on a memory card as well as online. I mounted it high in the bedroom corner. The bedroom camera could see the bed, the door, and the water glass. I had started placing across the threshold every night. The original camera remained in the living room. I synchronized both device clocks with my phone. Then I stood in front of each camera holding up a sheet of paper with the date and time written on it. It felt excessive. It also felt like the first sensible thing I had done. The next morning, the living room camera had recorded a motion event at 3:30 a.m. The bedroom camera had recorded nothing. I opened the bedroom's continuous timeline and dragged the marker back to 3. The video loaded in blocks. At 2005-9, I was asleep. At 3000, I was still asleep. At 3001, I rolled onto my side and pulled part of the blanket over my shoulder. The water glass remained in the doorway. I opened the living room clip. At 3000, I walked out of the same bedroom. I stood in front of the camera. The two videos showed the same minute from 2 rooms in the same apartment. In one, I was sleeping. In the other, I was standing in the living room. I played them side by side. The sound from both recordings matched. At 3018, a truck passed on the street outside. Its low engine noise rose and faded in both videos. At 3031, the heating pipe made 2 dull clicks. Both cameras recorded them. At 3044, the person in the living room turned his head toward the bedroom. At that exact second, the sleeping version of me shifted beneath the blanket. The person in the living room stayed still, listening. Then he looked back at the camera. His expression was calm. Not blank. Not sleepy. Calm. It was the expression of someone who had heard what he expected to hear. I watched the 2 clips until my phone dimmed. I could not make them fit together. They were not separate nights. The background sounds proved that. They were not separate apartments. The layout, furniture, and small marks on the wall were mine. The person was not an intruder wearing my clothes. The gray shirt in the living room footage had a loose thread near the collar. The same thread was visible on the shirt I wore in bed. I still did not call the police. There was nothing useful to tell them. I was safe. Nothing had been stolen. No door had opened. The only evidence showed me walking through my own apartment. I could imagine how the conversation would sound. I could imagine the polite pause on the other end of the line. So I called the camera company again. The support agent listened while I explained the conflicting videos. She asked whether both cameras were connected to the same account. I told her they were not. She asked whether I had edited the clips. I told her I had not. There was a pause. Then she said, devices from different manufacturers may process timestamps differently. Do they process people differently? Another pause. She asked me to send both files. I did. The written response arrived late that afternoon. The first company said the video had passed an integrity check. The second company said the bedroom recording showed no missing frames or interruptions. Both clips were authentic. Neither company used that word, but that was what they meant. That evening, Mara came over. I had finally told her about the second camera. She wanted to see the apartment and the devices for herself. She checked the bedroom window. She checked the front lock. She looked beneath the bed and inside the utility closet, even though I had already done those things. Then she watched both recordings on my laptop. I sat beside her at the kitchen table. For several minutes, the only sound was the laptop fan. When the clips ended, Mara leaned back. "That's you," she said. "I know." "No, I mean both of them are you. I know." She rubbed her forehead. "You need to get rid of the cameras." That was not what I expected her to say. What if something is actually happening? The cameras are the only place where it's happening. I looked toward the living room. The small black lens pointed across the couch. Mara lowered her voice, although there was nobody else in the apartment. "Turn them off for a few nights. See if anything changes." I agreed. Before she left, she asked whether I wanted to stay at her place. I almost said yes. Then I thought about sleeping on a couch in an unfamiliar room. I thought about waking her every time the building pipes made a sound. I said I would be fine. After she left, I unplugged both cameras. I removed their memory cards and placed them in a kitchen drawer. Then I covered the lenses with folded dish towels. The apartment felt lighter without the tiny status lights. I slept through the night. Nothing was moved in the morning. The glass in the doorway was untouched. My keys were in the bowl. The couch cushion was on the left. I kept the cameras off for 3 more nights. Nothing happened. My sleep improved. The pressure behind my eyes eased. I stopped checking the time when I woke in darkness. By the 4th day, I felt embarrassed. Stress can make ordinary things feel significant. Software can fail in ways that look impossible. 2 incorrect timestamps can line up. Compression can build a face from noise. Memory is not as reliable as people think. I could produce an explanation for every part as long as I did not try to explain all of it at once. That evening, I took the towels off the cameras. I planned to sell them. The living room camera was still unplugged. Its power light was dark. When I picked it up, my phone vibrated. A motion alert appeared on the screen. Living room, motion detected 3000 AM. The alert was from the previous night. I had checked the app that morning. There had been nothing. I opened it. The clip loaded slowly. At first the picture was black. Then the night vision image appeared. The camera angle was low and enclosed. Pale fabric filled part of the frame. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. The camera was recording from beneath the dish towel. The device should not have had power. In the clip, someone lifted the edge of the towel. My face appeared in the narrow gap. One eye looked directly into the lens. The angle was wrong. The camera had been on top of the cabinet. For me to look into it from that position, I would have needed to lean over the cabinet and lower my face against the wood. The eye remained there for several seconds. Then the person whispered something. The audio was too faint to understand. It was not a full sentence. It might not have been speech at all. The towel dropped. The clip ended. I listened through headphones. There were 3 soft sounds. The first sounded like still. The second was only air. The third sounded like here. I deleted the clip. Then I deleted the app. I placed both cameras in a box and sealed it with packing tape. I put the box at the back of the utility closet. For the rest of that evening, I kept the television on. I did not watch it. I only wanted a human voice in the apartment. At 2005 AM, I was still awake. At 2005, I checked the front door. At 2005, I checked the bedroom window. At 2005-9, I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the time change. 3 o'clock arrived. Nothing happened. There was no movement in the hallway, no sound from the living room. At 3001, I laughed once. It was not because anything was funny. It was a small release of breath. Then, from inside the utility closet, I heard the soft electronic chime of a camera switching modes. I did not open the closet. I sat on the bed until morning. The box was still sealed when I checked it in daylight. Both cameras were inside. Both were unplugged. The memory cards were still in the kitchen drawer. I took the box to an electronics recycling center that afternoon. I watched the employee place it in a large rolling bin with old routers, cables, and broken computer monitors. I did not ask for a receipt. For almost 2 weeks there were no recordings. There could not have been. I had no cameras. I still woke near 3 sometimes, but I stayed in bed. I listened to the building settle. I watched the pale numbers on my alarm clock change. Nothing entered the room. Nothing moved. Eventually, I decided the experience was over. Then a new camera arrived in the mail. The package had my name and address on it. There was no return address. Inside was a small indoor security camera. It was not the same model as either of the others. The plastic casing was black, with a wide circular lens in the center. There was no invoice. There were no instructions. A yellow note was attached to the base. Replacement device. That was all it said. I contacted both manufacturers. Neither had sent it. I contacted the seller through which I had bought the second camera. They had no replacement order under my account. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I placed it on the kitchen counter. I did not plug it in. For 2 days, it sat there. Whenever I entered the kitchen, the lens seemed to catch more light than it should. It looked wet, though the surface was dry. On the third evening, I came home and found the camera on the living room shelf. It faced the hallway. I stood inside the front door with my coat still on. I tried to remember moving it. I could not. The power cord ran behind the shelf and into the wall. The small status light was green. My phone did not have an app for it. I did not know how it had connected to the network. I unplugged the cord. The light stayed green. I pressed the power button. Nothing changed. I carried the camera to the kitchen and placed it inside a metal storage tin. The lens remained pointed upward as I closed the lid. Then I put the tin in the utility closet. That night, I left every light in the apartment on. At 3:00 a.m., my phone vibrated. An unfamiliar camera app had installed itself. Its icon was a plain black circle. There was one device listed, Home. Beneath it was a motion clip. I opened it. The footage showed my living room from the original shelf position. The camera was not on the shelf. It was inside a closed tin in the utility closet. Still, the view was clear. At 3, I came out of the bedroom. The person in the footage wore the clothes I was wearing at that moment, not the clothes I'd worn to bed. I was still awake, sitting on my bed in jeans and a dark sweater. He walked into the living room and stopped. For the first time, he did not look at the lens. He looked toward the couch. Then he sat down. He rested his hands on his knees and waited. After a few seconds, he turned his head toward the empty space beside him. He listened. His eyes followed something across the room. There was nothing visible there. He nodded as though somebody had spoken. Then he stood and approached the camera. He held up 5 fingers. He lowered one. 4. He lowered another. 3. He continued until his hand was closed. Then he touched 2 fingers to the center of his chest. After that, he pointed toward the bedroom. The clip ended. I deleted the app. It reappeared before I could lock the phone. I powered the phone off. The screen went black. A second later, the camera app opened on the dark screen. The home device showed a live view of the living room. The room was empty. I could see the couch, the shelf, and the hallway. The live image was not green. It was in full color. The lights in the apartment were visible exactly as I had left them. I walked from the bedroom to the living room. On the phone, my figure entered the frame. There was a delay of less than a second. I lifted my right hand. The figure on the screen lifted its right hand. I stepped backward. It stepped backward. For several minutes, everything worked normally. Then I noticed the couch cushion. In the apartment, it was on the left. On the screen, it was on the right. The bowl on the side table was empty in the live feed. In front of it, my keys, coins, receipt, and pen were arranged in a neat row. I turned away from the phone and looked at the real table. The objects were still inside the bowl. When I looked back at the screen, the version of me in the live feed had not turned with me. He was still facing the camera. I was holding the phone near my chest. The version on the screen held nothing. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then he turned his head slightly to the left. That unfamiliar tilt. The live feed froze. The app closed. When I opened it again, there were no devices connected. The new camera was still inside the tin. I could hear the faint hum of its motor through the metal. I called Mara. She came over without asking many questions. I showed her the camera, the app, and the new clip. The app no longer displayed the live feed, but the motion recording remained in my phone's storage. Mara watched it twice. When the person in the clip counted down on his fingers, she paused the video. "What is that?" she asked. "I don't know. Has he done it before?" "He?" She looked at me. Neither of us corrected the word. I told her about the live feed and the objects in the wrong positions. She looked at the bowl on the table. "You need to leave tonight," I agreed. I packed a small bag while Mara waited in the living room. I took clothes, a charger, and a toothbrush. When I came back from the bedroom, she was standing near the shelf. "What?" I asked. She pointed toward the hallway. "Did you just walk past there?" "No. I saw somebody go into the bedroom. We checked the room together. It was empty. The closet door was open, though I remembered closing it. Mara did not say anything. I stayed at her apartment that night. At 3:00 a.m., my phone vibrated on her coffee table. The home app had returned. There was a new clip. The video showed my apartment. The person who looked like me stood in the living room. He was wearing my coat. My small travel bag rested on the floor beside him. Those things were with me at Mara's apartment. He looked into the camera. Then he picked up the bag and walked into the bedroom. The clip continued after he disappeared. Nothing moved for almost a minute. Then the bedroom light went off. Mara watched over my shoulder. "That isn't possible," she said. It was the first useful thing anyone had said. I stayed with her for 3 nights. Every night, a new clip arrived at 3. The person in my apartment followed the routine. I would have followed if I'd been home. On the first night, he turned off the lamps. On the second, he put a mug in the sink and checked the front lock. On the third, he sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. The screen faced away from the camera. His hands moved over the keyboard for nearly 20 minutes. My laptop was in my bag beside Mara's couch. The next morning, I opened it. A text file was waiting on the desktop. It had no title. Inside was a list of times. 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, 3,000. The same time appeared 43 times. At the bottom, one line was different. "Tonight stay, where I can see you." I closed the laptop. Mara read the file and told me not to go home. But I knew staying away was not solving anything. The recordings did not depend on where I slept. The camera did not depend on being plugged in. The apartment and the footage did not depend on the objects in my real apartment. Whatever was happening had become consistent. That frightened me more than if it had been random. Random things can stop. A routine has somewhere to go. I returned home before dark. Mara offered to come with me, but I said no. I did not want another person in the apartment at 3. I could not explain why. Maybe I was afraid the camera would make room for her too. I prepared carefully. I removed the bedroom camera, the old power cords, and every unused device from the apartment. I placed the black replacement camera on the original living room shelf. I wanted it visible. I wanted to know exactly where it was. I put a chair in the center of the living room, facing the lens. The chair was a straight-back dining chair. It was uncomfortable enough to keep me awake. I placed my phone on a tripod beside the camera. Its ordinary video app would record the entire room. I set my laptop on the table with the mysterious camera app open. I sealed the bedroom door with strips of blue painter's tape across the frame. If the door opened, the tape would tear. I set a full glass of water against the bottom of the door. I wore my fitness watch. I turned on continuous tracking. I made coffee, though I barely drank it. At 2:30 a.m., I sat in the chair. The apartment was very quiet. The refrigerator cycled off. A car passed outside. The heating pipes clicked once, then settled. At 2004-7, I checked every device. The phone camera showed me seated in the chair. The laptop showed the same live view from the security camera. The timestamps matched. The painter's tape remained smooth across the bedroom door. At 2005, my mouth felt dry. I could hear the soft friction of my breathing through my nose. At 2058, the replacement camera made a tiny mechanical sound. Its lens adjusted. The green status light went out. The live feed continued. At 2005-9, the digital clock changed without a sound. I kept both hands flat on my knees. I watched myself on the laptop. The figure in the live feed copied my posture. The cushion was on the left in both rooms. The keys were inside the bowl. Everything matched. 3 o'clock arrived. I did not move. Nothing came out of the bedroom. The painter's tape did not tear. The glass did not shift. On the laptop, I remained seated in the chair. 1 minute passed. Then 2. At 3003, I began to feel foolish. At 3005, my phone vibrated on the tripod. The recording app kept running, but a notification appeared across the top of the screen. Home, motion, detected at 3:30 a.m. I was still sitting in front of the camera. The live feed still showed me in the chair. I opened the motion clip. The recorded living room looked almost identical. The same lights were on. The same shadows lay across the rug. The same glass of water rested against the sealed bedroom door. But the chair in the middle of the room was empty. The timestamp read 3000. In the recording, the painter's tape peeled away from the bedroom frame without tearing. The door opened, and at 3, the man on the recording got out of my bed anyway.